The old joke slipped from her lips like smoke from a dying fire, careless and half-laughing, meant to fade into the night and never return. Yet it would become the promise that shattered everything she thought she knew about fate. Because when Nanton of the Apache spoke those words to Caleb Hart, the lone white cowboy passing through the edge of her people's land, she never imagined the land itself would conspire to make them real, and certainly never imagined the ring her mother had worn. The ring stolen from her during the chaos of a forced relocation years earlier would ever be found again, much less by the quiet man with storm-gray eyes who listened more than he spoke. The sun had been sinking behind the red cliffs when it happened, painting the desert in blood and gold, and Caleb had dismounted near the creek where Nanton gathered herbs, his horse snorting softly as if sensing the tension between two worlds standing face to face. And though the years had carved suspicion into Nanton's heart, she did not raise her knife, because there was something about the way Caleb stood, hat in hand, respectful, unarmed, as if he understood that the land beneath his boots was not his to claim. They spoke cautiously at first, words chosen like stepping stones across a river swollen with history. And when he asked about the silver ring she wore on a cord around her neck, a plain band, etched with Apache symbols, her fingers closed around it instinctively, pain flickering across her face as she told him it was not the real one, only a copy she had made to remember what was taken. And he listened, truly listened, as she told him how soldiers had driven her people away, how her mother had hidden the original ring in a small deerskin pouch before chaos erupted, how it vanished forever along with her mother's life. And it was then, perhaps to mask the ache tightening her chest, perhaps to remind herself that hope was foolish, that she laughed softly and said the words that would haunt them both. "If you ever find that ring, cowboy, I suppose I'd have to be yours." And she meant it as a joke, a fragile shield against grief, because such things did not happen in the real world. And Caleb smiled, not the arrogant grin she expected, but a small, thoughtful curve of the mouth, as if he had just been handed something sacred rather than a challenge. Days passed, then weeks, and Caleb did not leave as others did, instead taking work repairing fences and breaking horses for nearby ranchers, always circling back toward Apache land. And Nanton watched him from a distance, telling herself it was only caution. Yet each time she saw him speaking kindly to elders, trading fairly, refusing whiskey when offered, something in her guarded spirit softened. And when he asked permission to search the old trail where her people had been driven years ago, claiming he had a feeling about the land, she nearly laughed again, because feelings did not unearth lost history. Yet she agreed, if only to prove to herself that hope was still a lie. They rode together across unforgiving ground where bones of wagons still bleached in the sun, and silence pressed heavy. And as Caleb searched patiently, inch by inch, Nanton felt something dangerous growing, not belief, but fear, because what if he found nothing, and the fragile thread binding them snapped? And worse still, what if he found everything? Because what then, when a joke demanded to be honored? The day dragged long, dust clinging to skin and clothing, and when the sun dipped low again, Caleb dismounted near a stand of twisted juniper, his movements slowing, as if the land itself whispered to him, and he knelt, brushing aside earth with bare hands. And when his fingers struck metal, time seemed to tear open, because from the soil he lifted a small, weathered deerskin pouch, cracked with age but unmistakable. And when he opened it, revealing the silver ring etched with Apache symbols worn smooth by generations, Nanton's breath left her in a sob she did not recognize as her own, her knees buckling as memory and grief crashed together. Because this was not just a ring, it was her mother's voice, her people's survival. And when Caleb placed it in her trembling palm, his touch gentle as prayer, she saw not triumph in his eyes but awe and fear, because he understood what this meant. And in that moment, the joke was no longer a joke, the land was no longer silent, and the promise she never meant to keep rose like a storm between them. While far away unseen forces stirred, resentments awakened, and a truth neither of them was ready to face took root, because fate had answered a careless laugh with something far more dangerous. Hapith ring lay heavy in Nanton's palm long after the sun disappeared, its silver catching firelight as though the spirits themselves refused to let it fade back into darkness. And the weight of it pressed not just against her skin but against every wall she had built to survive. Because with that single impossible discovery, the past was no longer buried, and the future could no longer be avoided. And Caleb knew it too, even as he stepped back respectfully, giving her space, because the promise she had made in jest now stood between them like a living thing, breathing, watching, waiting to be claimed or denied. That night, the wind howled across the canyon as if carrying voices of ancestors who had witnessed too many broken vows, and Nathan did not sleep, sitting by the fire with the ring clenched in her fist, torn between anger at fate for answering a joke and a terror far deeper, that maybe the spirits had chosen this quiet cowboy for a reason she did not yet understand. By morning, word had spread, because miracles, even reluctant ones, do not stay silent among people who have learned to listen to the land. And elders came, their lined faces unreadable as they examined the ring, nodding slowly as if confirming something they already knew, murmuring that the land gives back only to those who ask with humility. And every nod tightened the knot in Nathan's chest, because the land had answered Caleb, not her, and that frightened her more than any soldier ever had. Caleb, for his part, offered no claim, no reminder of her words, instead saying only that the ring belonged with her people and that he would leave if his presence brought trouble. And it was that quiet willingness to walk away that cracked something open inside her, because men who seek to own do not let go so easily. And yet the world was not kind to fragile truths, and resentment soon followed reverence, rising in the form of Thomas Reed, a rancher whose hatred for the Apache burned hotter than the desert sun, a man who had watched Caleb's growing bond with them and saw betrayal instead of harmony. And when Reed spread the lie that Caleb had staged the discovery to manipulate Nathan and claim land through marriage, violence followed close behind, first in whispered threats, then in torches against the night. And when shots rang out near the edge of Apache land, Nathan knew the promise was no longer just hers, it had become a battleground. She confronted Caleb at dawn, anger and fear tangling in her voice as she demanded to know why fate had chosen him, why her mother's ring had answered his hands, and Caleb, eyes steady, told her the truth he had never spoken aloud, that years earlier he had ridden with a unit, ordered to clear the land, that he had deserted when he saw what was being done. That guilt had led him back again and again to that trail, not hope of reward, but a need to return something stolen. And the confession struck harder than any lie could have, because love born from guilt is fragile, yet love born from truth is terrifyingly real. Nathan turned away, her heart breaking into directions, torn between honoring her people's pain and acknowledging the man who had chosen conscience over command. And when Reed and his men came that night, weapons drawn, intent on forcing Caleb out or killing him where he stood, it was Nathan who stepped forward, the ring now worn openly on her hand, her voice cutting through the chaos as she declared the promise, fulfilled not by possession, but by choice, that she would stand with the man who returned what was lost, not because of a joke, but because the land itself had spoken through his actions. Shots were fired, horses screamed, and in the chaos Caleb shielded an elder, taking a bullet meant for another. And as he fell, blood staining the dust, Nathan's scream carried across the canyon, a sound so raw it seemed to tear the sky. And it was in that moment, kneeling beside him, pressing her hands against his wound, that she understood the true cost of the promise, not ownership, not romance, but sacrifice. Caleb survived, though the scar would remain, a permanent reminder of the night hate was challenged by courage, and Reed was driven off, his power broken not by guns, but by witnesses who could no longer deny the truth they had seen. Seasons passed, and Caleb did not claim Nathan as his prize, nor did she surrender herself as payment for a found ring. Instead, they walked side by side, rebuilding trust one act at a time. And when at last Nathan chose to bind her life with his, it was not because of a careless joke spoken by a creek, but because he had proven that some men listen when the land speaks. And years later, when children asked about the ring and the promise, Nathan would smile softly and say that fate hears even our jokes, and sometimes answers them with trials we never expected. And if this story moved you, if you believe in promises tested by fire, in love earned through truth, subscribe to the channel now, because more powerful stories like this are coming, and the next one may just change the way you see destiny itself.